Well, greetings and welcome to another edition of the Has Been podcast on this Monday, May 18th. As we wind down things here in the spring sports calendar for Purdue, the Big Ten, and everybody else. Um, Couple things to touch on today. It was announced today that President Mung Chiang from Purdue will be leaving and taking the same position at Northwestern. So he's staying in the Big Ten, but going to Northwestern. Um, it's a significant move when you lose a president at the NCAA level, and with everything going on just in athletics, let alone everything with the university and federal funding and all that kind of stuff that um, has surfaced here in the last couple of years. Um, but from an athletic standpoint, Mung leaving in the short term really is not a big deal. Not because Mung's not a big deal, it's just not a big deal because things are in place. Things they're going to finish out the school year no problem, and they're prepared to go into the next athletic year, fiscal year, uh, with no issues. So the short term impact of Purdue losing its president and then getting a new one probably in the next 4 months, 6 months, maybe. These things take time, search firms, and all that kind of stuff. I would anticipate. I don't know if they'll have somebody in place by the start of the school year. Might be close. Also depends who's interested, and are there any internal candidates? Like Mung was an internal candidate when he replaced Mitch Daniels. But from an athletic standpoint, I don't see um, a big impact in the short term. There's just not. Um, as you should be aware, with the House settlement and the revenue share, each school takes care of that money on their own. Um, in Purdue's case, the university has agreed for 3 years to uh, make the athletic department whole at the end of each fiscal year, meaning they'll fill the gap. Because basically Purdue athletic department started the year in a 20.5 million dollar hole. That's the salary cap that they are required to pay the athletes um, based on the House settlement. Um, and the university is going to fill that gap. So they'll have to fill a gap. I mean, there's no way that Purdue athletic department can not face a deficit this year. They'll make them whole, and that's a commitment for 3 years. Now, what happens beyond that? I still think Purdue will do it, but you'll have a new president in charge. I don't, the board members are still there, um, and it just depends who they hire, what type of person that they hire, and um, all that kind of stuff. So long term, it could have some impact. Initially, um, it'll have an impact on who leads the athletic department because Mike Bobinski's contract, um, I believe, goes through 2028. So he's got a couple years left. Uh, and so does the new president want to extend him beyond that? He's approaching 70. Not that age matters, but performance matters more than age right now. Um, and by that point, where will football be? That'll be the judge, and then all the other sports as well. Uh, but that's where the new president will um, play a role. Mung is a big fan of Mike Levinsky. He's made that clear since he took over. Calls him the best AD in America. Um, and we'll see if the new president follows suit. Um, so this is kind of a curveball. You would have to think internally. Uh, People in the athletic department, especially the higher ups, knew this was coming because it sounds like Mung had agreed to become the Northwestern president in the last week or so. So I would guess that they knew that this was coming, and now they just kind of get things organized. Again, short term, I don't think it's a big issue at all. It's just when you get into the long term of it, and who's going to lead your athletic department, what direction it is, what is the new president's stance and voice in athletics. Presidents have kind of been silent as all this bending of the rules and no guardrails continues to go on. Presidents basically rule the NCAA, and if they're not going to get involved, if they're not going to step up and make sure their coaches are following the rules that the way they are, like you wouldn't, if presidents would speak up and tell their coaches, hey, don't go recruit the guy who just was drafted in the NBA. We don't do that. Don't do that. And it would stop, but presidents don't do that. Um, they can claim they're doing other things, which they should be, but they're also in charge of the athletic department. So it just depends. With Mitch Daniels, you had a president that was interested in athletics, um, wanted to learn about the new landscape when he came to Purdue. He was stuck in a lot of traditional values about how athletics should be. He preferred freshmen being eligible. Now we're going back a ways now, but he learned. He was educated on it. And he was slowly brought into the air of like if you want Purdue to be um, really good in this area, these are the things you have to do. These are the financial resources that you have to commit to it. And it took Mitch Daniels a little bit to get there, but he did with some help from members of the board and the athletic department, understanding the window that athletics opens to the university. And there's not a bigger example of that than what happened at the Final Four a few years ago when Purdue was in Phoenix or Glendale, and they they had three-quarters of the stadium. Um, and I think that had a lasting impact on anybody that didn't believe the what athletics can do for a university. Than that right there. And I think that has had some staying power with the administration, not only at the university level but in the athletic world. That they understand its importance. Now they're not going to go overboard here, but um, so when they want to make up the deficit of what the athletic department will have this fiscal year, they're more willing to do it because they've seen the benefit of that. They saw admissions jump once Purdue got more out into the news cycle. So there's a lot of benefits to that, and you want your new president to embrace that. You want him to understand that, along with keeping what has made Purdue what it is. Um, so it will be interesting to see the type of candidates that pop up. And through the years, you've had a president like France Cordova, who really wasn't in tune with what was going on in the athletic world. And she was around in a time when Nebraska was coming to the Big Ten, and that was, she she didn't fully, I don't think she fully understood the scope of that and what that meant, because she took some of that new money and um, committed it to a building on campus, the CCEL building, I believe. Um, and that's okay. And through the years, the president has, once the Big Ten Network came aboard, and um, you're getting a new form of revenue for the schools. Presidents have been more eager to get some of that money for the university. Um, and through the years, that what the athletic department has paid the university, sent back to the university, has changed. And I think it's more probably in line now with what it probably should be, even though the media rights keep going up. So your new president has to wear a lot of different hats. Athletics not going to be at the top of the agenda, but it's going to be an important part, I believe, of the interview process and who they eventually pick. You don't want somebody that doesn't care about it. You want somebody that cares about it and understands its importance, but not be overboard with it. Um, so it just will be an interesting time. And as I said, with Mike Bobinski's contract, um, curious to see what happens there as you get closer to that date um, and all that. And does it need to be a Purdue person? Not necessarily. Mitch Daniels wasn't a Purdue person. Um, Mung worked at Purdue, but you so it's not that. So once the names of the candidates start to filter out, we get a better idea of what direction they'll go. And but yeah, it was probably a bit of a surprise that Mung would be leaving. I know the press release they sent out, he's in demand. True. I mean, I think he's had some opportunities to go elsewhere. I mean, he's a bright man. I mean, you don't become a president of a university without having those kind of credentials. And if you remember, he was being targeted by South Carolina, I believe, when the board decided to make him the next in line to replace Mitch Daniels, and um, so he's been a popular guy on the circuit. I'm interested in reading and hearing, why Northwestern for him. Um, what kind of pay raise did he get? And that's a private institution, so you're not going to know, at least initially, until they start filing tax returns and tax forms. Um, but there has to be the component of the academics and the research and all that's attractive for that job, and it is a very attractive job from an academic standpoint. And does he get away from some of the federal funding things? Does he? I mean, it is a private institution, so you're not leaning on that. But the federal government has long arms, and they like to get involved in things they shouldn't get involved in. But anyway, I'm starting to get out of my batter's box, so to speak. I don't need to be talking about things that I really don't know what I'm talking about, which is probably every day when you get right down to it. But anyway, Mung's leaving, and first step will be to get an interim president, and then go from there and see what the board has planned. The other item of business heading into this week, no, not the Indianapolis 500, although it's coming up. Um, Purdue baseball is in the Big Ten tournament, and a place they were not last year. Now it's a new format this year. Um, you kind of have to look at it to understand it. You have two tournaments within one tournament. You have a double elimination tournament with seeds 5 through 12. You have a single elimination tournament with the top four seeds, and then the qualifiers that come through the double elimination tournament. I would suggest to you, if you're really interested, to go to big10.org and look at the bracket and have a better understanding of how it works. Purdue is in the number 5 spot. They are the fifth seed. They had an opportunity to get to the top four. As it turns out, they would have needed to sweep Iowa to get to the top four based on how the rest of the games played out. And as you should know by now, if you don't, Purdue got swept by Iowa and got bludgeoned in the process from a pitching standpoint. The team ERA for the 3 games was 14.25. Iowa scored in double figures every game. They had a bunch of hits and a bunch of earned runs, and they battered Purdue's pitching staff. And that's the thing when you get in these tournaments that are double elimination and you're playing every day, can your pitching hold up? And in this tournament, the big advantage is you have your top four teams that don't play until Friday in the quarterfinals, and they'll have their number one ready to go on Friday, where the opponent that they play, regardless of who it is, has already burned through their number one and number two, and who knows else in the bullpen. So from a pitching standpoint, that's why those top four seeds were so critical that you get your pitching lined up and you would have fresh arms ready to go. But if you can score enough runs, you, you can win. And Purdue's problem at Iowa was just the pitching. I mean, um, they could not shut down Iowa's offense, which was lethal. I mean, they were hitting home runs. They scored double digits every game. Purdue scored first in every game, but Iowa went on runs. I know they scored 12 unanswered runs in the middle game, and um, they scored eight unanswered runs in the first game, and they just kind of they ran away from Purdue and hid. And um, Purdue didn't, from a Big Ten standpoint, it didn't hurt Purdue as much, but I think from an NCAA tournament standpoint, it did. Now you do look at the whole schedule and what Purdue has done throughout the year, and they've had a good year. Um, but you don't lose three in a row at the end of the year, um, when you're already on the bubble, and then to think that you're off the bubble would be wrong. I think Purdue's got a lot of work to do in the Big Ten tournament. Where before, if they would have secured that top four seed, one of those top four seeds, probably the number four seed, then you play a qualifier coming out of your little mini pod. And if you could have won the first game, then you probably face UCLA in the semifinals, which is probably going to be a stopping point for most teams. But in Purdue's case, if you'd at least gotten the top four, separated yourself from other schools seeded fifth, sixth, and seventh, and then somehow won your first game in the quarterfinals and then lost in the semifinals, you can continue to make a case. But you're going in with a 3 game losing streak, and again, your pitching staff has been battered and bruised, um, and now you've got to figure out a way to string together some wins and probably still figure out a way to get to the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament without losing a game. I don't think Purdue can afford another loss. Um, but baseball's a different kind of sport because of the double elimination and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a tough road right now for Purdue to make the NCAA tournament. Now, again, if they could string together some wins, get themselves to the semifinals, maybe they climb back into the bubble. And the other thing you have to keep in mind, there's a lot of bracketologists out there that do this on a daily basis, but the committee's going to do it once. So where does Purdue fall in that conversation? And um, can they land somewhere? Can they sneak in? Can they be one of the last four in? And a lot of it depends what else happens. But again, they've had a really good year. When you look at some previous seasons, it's unfortunate it ended the way that it did in the regular season. I think the hope was that they could get 2 out of 3 from Iowa, um, and then put themselves in a position maybe to get the top four. But if not, you felt a little bit better going into the Big Ten tournament. Now um, you've got to regroup, and but baseball, you do this virtually every day, so it's easy. Not easy, but bouncing back is something that you have to do in baseball because you don't win every time out. And but you'd like to see Purdue um, kind of represent itself well in the Big Ten tournament. Now they're going to play Michigan State, which finished 11-19 in the Big Ten. They got in because Minnesota lost 3 to Nebraska, and Michigan State ended up winning the tiebreaker with Minnesota. Minnesota had its opportunities to get in the tournament on Saturday, or on Friday, I believe. They were up 6-1 going into the ninth and gave up um, 6 or 7 runs in the ninth and got beat, and then got beat again Saturday and found itself out of the tournament. Purdue took 2 out of 3 from Michigan State in the regular season. Um, They were down 8 runs in one of the games, I think the second game, and came back and won 16-13. They hit some grand slams in that game. That was a week where Brandon Rogers hit a couple grand slams. Other guys hit grand slams. They were the team of the grand slams that week, along with a couple midweek games and then the Michigan State game. So, Purdue knows Michigan State. They know what they're about, but you're going to face their ace, and um, you've got to be ready. Your offense has to go. I mean, Purdue's going to have to outscore opponents in this tournament to win some games in advance. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Pitching's been Pitching has held up this year, but I think some of it also is the opponents that they've played. They haven't, they played Oregon, lost 2 out of 3. They played USC, lost all three, lost all three to Iowa. Um, they swept Ohio State, which has come on strong here at the end. They beat Northwestern, they beat Penn State. They did what they had to do in those games. They swept Indiana in dramatic fashion. Um, they haven't um, necessarily performed great against the upper part of the league. You mentioned, Oregon finished third, and they lost 2 out of 3 to Oregon. They lost all three to USC. USC finishes fourth. They lost all 3 games to Iowa. Um, and then you get down to some of the other opponents they played that are not even in the Big Ten tournament. So they benefited from the schedule. They did what they had to do to win. But now comes much different challenge for them in the Big Ten tournament. So that starts Tuesday early, 10 a.m. Eastern time from Omaha. If they win, regardless win or lose, they'll play Iowa or Illinois the next day, either in the winners portion or the losers portion of the bracket, and then you kind of go from there. Um, but ideally you want to get that first one and then um, go from there. Not much else going on. Women's basketball, they're sitting at 14 players. Don't know for sure if they'll fill out 15. They're only allowed 15 players. Don't see the necessity in having 15 players. I mean, unless there's just somebody out there that you got to have. First of all, you got one roster spot left. You're running out of minutes for players, and then you're running out of money for players. Um, I don't know if it's worth it to have 15 players on scholarship. Heavy international. That's the thing about this team right now. The roster, everything that we know about this team is only on paper because they haven't played together, haven't been together, they haven't been all in the same place together. But the other part of it is it's international players. Half of the roster is from international players. Now, one of the internationals was at a NCAA school last year, the player from UC Riverside, Anna Wickstrom. She's from Australia, but she's an international player. So you're bringing in roughly six players that are coming from overseas. And so you just don't have a good handle of what they can do from a talent perspective. They should be the international players should be older, should be more mature, should be physically um, in a better spot to deal with the rigors of the Big Ten. But as we saw last year with Ela Karsh, she didn't hold up that well. She came out of the gate strong in the first few games of the season, but then just kind of drifted and settled, and did some things at the end of the year, but it was too late at that point. And she was a 21-year-old freshman, and um, so only thing we know is it's what's on paper. And again, you've got to bring this team together. Um, you've got to create chemistry. You've got to do all those things to make it a functioning unit. And it hasn't worked, to be honest. It just hasn't worked the last couple of years by doing it this way. Um, so whether it'll work this year, no idea. And not going to know. until we get into the season. Um, so again, not much going on the women's basketball side. I mean, they're supposed to be in a tournament and Thanksgiving around Thanksgiving in Orlando. No idea who they would play. Um, men's basketball, they got a commitment from Isaiah Hill from Indianapolis Pike. Big pickup, another 7-footer in the Matt Painter arsenal. Um, he continues to be contrarian where others are portaling up. He's focused on the high schools. They'll take portal kids. I mean, there's no question about it, but his focus remains on recruiting, you know, high school kids, high school players, and building and maintaining a program that way. And it's worked for him. He's been doing a lot of years to get to this point. Just don't snap your finger and do it. But he stayed with it. He stayed true to who he is. And, while others are zagging, he's zigging, or while others are zigging, he's zagging, however you want to phrase it, um, which has allowed him to build and maintain this program to the way it is. And yeah, his guys are getting paid, and they're benefiting from that. But he hasn't lost sight of what his program is about. And how long can this continue? No idea. But it's working now, and you keep riding it for as long as you can. Um, Again, we should be learning some football times for the first um, few weeks of the season here shortly. Usually they're out by Memorial Day, but I remember some years covering the sport, they didn't get out until after Memorial Day. But you're holding up TV is what you're doing. Um, I mean, the only one that we know for sure is the Washington game was moved to a Friday in middle October. Um, but an interesting dynamic is happening because Purdue scheduled to open with Indiana State on that first weekend, and they're scheduled to play Wake Forest the next weekend. Well, Wake Forest has already moved its opening game to a Thursday. So if Purdue would keep its Indiana State game on Saturday, then Purdue would be 2 days behind from a prep standpoint when compared to Wake Forest. So can Purdue convince the Big Ten to move its Indiana State game up to a Thursday night? Um, that's not a marquee game. It's not a marquee night, not a marquee opponent. I'm not sure the last time Indiana State scored against Purdue. Um, but you got to have somebody televise the game. And if you don't, Minnesota has traditionally been in that spot, if I remember correctly. So, but if you're Purdue, you don't want to be at that disadvantage that early in the year where the other team has 2 days of prep ahead of you. But I would also say that while you take every game seriously, um, you could work in some Wake Forest during camp. I mean, you just could. Uh, that could be a reason why the times are not out yet. I really don't know. But it will be interesting to see how that all plays out. If Purdue's opener gets moved up, uh, since Wake Forest opener is moved up, because the Wake Forest game is a huge game for Purdue football. It really is this year. And I think I've mentioned this before. My time in covering Purdue football on a full-time basis, every year, September was the most crucial month because if you got off to a bad start, you were doomed the last 2 months. If you got off to a good start, you had a chance to do some things. And it's no different this year. They've got to get off to a good start. Um, they'll beat Indiana State, but can you beat Wake Forest? And Wake Forest is a better program than they are right now. Doesn't mean Purdue can't beat them. It's just they're a better program right now. And then you go to UCLA. You got Notre Dame at home, which is a game you'll lose. UCLA won't be an easy game, even though they were down last year. They have a new coach, new system, um, and you've got to make that trip to the West Coast. So it really comes down to me to the Wake Forest game. If you can win that, then that sets you up once you get past Notre Dame going into October, November to have a shot to pick up some more wins and maybe put yourself in a position to get to a bowl game. But if you lose to Wake Forest, you're most likely going to lose at UCLA. One loss doesn't necessarily mean another loss, but you're probably going to lose at UCLA. I mean, we know they'll lose to Notre Dame. So worst case scenario, you're 1-3 and you're playing uphill in October and November. And I don't know if this team has the talent um, and the capability to play uphill, against any Big Ten teams once you get to October and November, and that's not even factoring in the injuries that you're going to suffer. So anyway, should get some times on football games here within the next week, 10 days. I don't see it dragging out much longer than that, but when TV's involved, you just kind of sit back and wait. All right, well, abbreviated compared to other times of this get together that we have. Appreciate you stopping by, and we'll do this again. We'll see what happens with Purdue baseball at the Big Ten tournament, and then go from there. All right, appreciate it. Thank you.